You ask me if I have a God complex? Let me tell you something. I am God.
There is an element of arrogance that could grow in any one of us, and if we allow it to control us, it could destroy our relationships with the people who matter most. In this video, we'll talk about what arrogance is, what it does, and how it harms the people around us. In a series of studies published in the European Journal of Personality, the findings of the psychologists revealed that arrogance is an elevated sense of self-worth. Arrogance can also make people feel that they have the right to overpower, to dominate, and to control others. A depraved and prideful person will put others down in order to appear better and will refuse to accept that others may have better accomplishments, smarter ideas, or better possessions. They'll always put themselves forward while disregarding everyone else. So what happens when a self-entitled, arrogant person is given the power to influence the decisions that impacts people's lives? Their sense of superiority will drive them to overpower the weak. From injustice to oppression to high social inequality, the list is endless, and these detrimental effects tear apart the social fabric of a healthy society. In British-ruled India, and before India gained its independence, an arrogant king who ruled the southern part of India set out to humiliate those who he felt were beneath him. He did not want to blur the lines of caste difference and didn't want the lower castes to appear equal to those of a higher social standing. So he levied an absurd form of tax that had to be paid if women wanted to cover their breasts. This was enforced upon the lower castes, and because they were poor, they could not afford to pay the tax and were subjugated to public humiliation. This is a scene taken from the movie Mulla Karam. Watch how the tax collectors come to collect the dreaded breast tax.
आज 1 महीना पूरा हो गया है, मुल्ला करम लेने आए हैं।
आप यहीं रुकिए, मैं अभी आती हूँ।
रुको, उससे पहले तुम्हारे स्तन का परीक्षण होगा। उसके आकार और वजन के हिसाब से मुल्ला करम तय किया जाएगा।
The inducing effects of arrogance made the king believe that the upper castes were superior, and only they were allowed to cover up because of their so-called exalted nature. As for the women from the lower castes, they were not entitled to their own bodies and were deprived of any modesty. This was the way of life in one of the British-ruled Indian states a century ago, and this is true, as outrageous as it may sound. Before India outlawed the discriminatory caste system in the 1950s, the moment a baby was born, its position within the social hierarchy was defined, and it continued until its death. The higher caste members considered the lower caste members impure. They were not allowed to eat with them, marry from them, or even sit with them.
Tam tu zato ili ti? Zato ne vidim.
Kim?
Bada wala obrani. Biza dai.
तो नहीं जाते हैं
Bada pa na bani mo ko de. Shi zawad ne. Mun la ka zira. हमारे भी वो लग रहा है तू बोले जा मुझे क्लोज ले जा
ये होता है मतलब शर्म है
ले जा है
We've all had an encounter with an arrogant person. Sometimes we're arrogant ourselves in certain situations. So what's the cure for arrogance? And how can one avoid the perils of having a superiority complex and viewing others as below their standard? Most governments all over the world work very hard to spread equality among the sexes, the races, and the cultural differences to bring people together. There was an initiative which began over 1,400 years ago that effectively worked towards removing arrogance from the hearts of men and women. And it is practiced to this very day, the Jama'ah prayer. Here's how it works. A lot of people may not know that before the arrival of Islam, the Arabs were a very proud people. They took pride in their lineage and had a superiority complex, bar to none. The nobles looked at most people outside their tribe as beneath them. When they began to embrace Islam, they were taught that all men and women were equal to the Creator, and that it was preferable to meet 5 times a day at the mosque to pray the Jama'ah prayer, standing side by side. It broke the societal barriers that governed their way of life and separated people based on their lineage, their wealth, their color, and their place in society. A slave could stand right next to a king, shoulder to shoulder, and there was no favoritism or VIP seats reserved for the powerful people. You arrive early, you sit at the front. If you arrive late, you sit at the back. And in some places, people would shake hands at the end of the prayer. It created a sense of unity and brotherhood amongst the people, and the people were all called to prayer to leave their homes 5 times a day, even if the caller was a child, or even if the caller was a black man who was once a slave. Much like Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu anhu. The powerful nobles had to answer his call to prayer, no matter what place they occupied in society. Now, you may argue that there are still arrogant people who attend the prayers. That is true. But if it wasn't for the Jama'ah prayers, they would not be sitting next to a person who they feel they're superior to. The Jama'ah brings people together of all races, class, and social backgrounds.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله